Good evening and welcome to Capitol Report on NTD. Here's what's coming up. President Trump laying out priorities at his first official cabinet meeting. What he's announcing about in slashing government size and hitting more countries with tariffs. How can the U.S. strengthen the economy of the Virgin Islands and remain the global power in the region? We'll speak with the delegate from the United States Virgin Islands, Representative Stacey Plaskett. Bomb threats targeting American performing arts company Shen Yun. How they tie into a larger effort by the Chinese Communist Party to attack the fundamental values of freedom of speech and belief on U.S. soil.
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
I'm Jack Bradley, in for Steve Lance tonight. At his first official cabinet meeting, President Trump backs Elon Musk's work to reform the government while announcing more tariffs. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
One of the most important initiatives is DOGE.
And President Trump on Wednesday held his first cabinet meeting in his second term with Elon Musk in the spotlight, sitting just away from the main table of all the secretaries. President Trump made clear his priority of slashing the size of the federal government and reducing the $2 trillion U.S. deficit.
We're cutting down the size of government. We have to. We're bloated. We're sloppy. We have a lot of people that aren't doing their job.
And President Trump, while saying that his secretaries have a lot of respect for Elon Musk, also did acknowledge that some do disagree with him a little bit. But Trump defended Musk's work, while Elon Musk himself, speaking before any of the secretaries did, spoke of personal threats against him. Watch.
He's sacrificing a lot and getting a lot of praise, I'll tell you, but he's also getting hit.
And taking a lot of flack, and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I'm going to like stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt.
And President Trump today also signed a new executive order to further back the work that DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, is doing. A White House official told the NTD that the order will make sure that all the agency heads will need to now work with DOGE to review and terminate all unnecessary contracts. And all travel expenses will also need to be reviewed. Meanwhile, while the administration is trying to cut spending, President Trump made clear today that he won't make any cuts to programs like the Social Security program or Medicare or Medicaid. And that's as he's also proposing a new way to bring in revenue and cut deficit, and that is by rolling out a new gold card program for wealthy foreigners to try to immigrate to the U.S. with for $5 million each. And he says that revenue from these cards sold will be used to reduce the U.S. deficit.
I think it's going to sell like crazy. It's a bargain.
And during the meeting, Trump also announced more foreign policy moves. On tariffs, he says he's not stopping tariffs on Mexico and Canada, but is moving the rollout date to April 2nd.
We've lost millions of people due to fentanyl. It comes mostly from China, but it comes through Mexico and it comes through Canada.
And President Trump also vowed to impose a 25% tariffs on EU goods, and that, he says, is to make sure that the trade relations become more balanced. Meanwhile, also today, Trump spoke about the Russia-Ukraine war. He confirmed that on this upcoming Friday, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will be visiting the White House to sign an agreement with the U.S. on its rare earth minerals. And meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance, who was also at the meeting, pushed back against media reports about early concessions being made to Russia. Watch.
You guys preemptively accuse him of conceding to Russia. He hasn't conceded anything to anyone. He's doing the job of a diplomat.
And on Thursday, the UK Prime Minister will visit the White House and sit down with President Trump. Of course, at the top of their meeting agenda is how to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. Back to you.
Now, the Trump administration's fast-tracking government downsizing. The president's calling on agencies to finalize large-scale job cuts and restructuring plans by mid-March. In a memo today, President Trump orders agencies to prepare and submit Phase 1 agency reductions in force and reorganization plans by March 13th. The directive implements and expands Trump's February 11th executive order aimed at launching a critical transformation of the federal bureaucracy. Now, Trump is directing agency heads to collaborate with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, on developing their workforce reduction plans. And the Supreme Court is signaling it will make it easier for Americans to file reverse discrimination lawsuits. The The High Court heard arguments today in the case of an Ohio woman who claimed that she was denied a promotion and demoted because she's straight. Marlene Ames filed a lawsuit in 2020 against her employer, Ohio's Department of Youth Services. Lower courts ruled against her, so she appealed to the Supreme Court. Ames is challenging a requirement in some U.S. courts that plaintiffs from majority groups provide more evidence to move a discrimination case forward than someone from a minority group. Now, all the justices, both conservative and liberal, seem to be in agreement on the case, and if they rule in her favor, Ames will be able to refile her lawsuit. And now a series of bills in Congress aims to amend taxes on the U.S. Virgin Islands. What are the unique challenges that Virgin Islanders face, and how can the U.S. remain the global power in the region? NTD's Steve Lance spoke with the sponsor of those bills, the delegate from the United States Virgin Islands, Representative Stacey Plaskett.
Representative Stacey Plaskett, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you with us. As the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands, you've introduced a series of bills aimed at amending the taxes on the islands. First, sure. If you could, tell us what the goal of these bills would be and how it would ultimately affect those that live there.
Sure. Thanks so much for that. I came to Congress really focused on economic development in the Virgin Islands. Both my parents are from the Virgin Islands. My family goes back about 300 years, but I was born and raised in New York City and was actually incentivized to come back home through a law firm that needed additional lawyers in the firm to do finance, to do mergers with them, to really do transactional law. And the reason they had such a burgeoning amount of activity was economic tax laws which had been passed previously from the 1990s that incentivized American companies to do business in the Virgin Islands. And they were given tax reduction in taxes by being in the Virgin Islands if they made certain investments, along with hiring employees. So I have been trying to bring additional tax support to the Virgin Islands to try and through investments, through tax credits, which have worked throughout the country, to try and incentivize businesses to come into the Virgin Islands. We have an enormous port, one of the deepest water ports in the Virgin Islands. 7 nations have owned us for our geographic location. And so trying to bring some synergies with that opportunity that we have, along with American companies.
So, when we think about the Virgin Islands, at least when I do, you often just think about paradise. Talk to us about some of the challenges that you guys are facing there, as well as how you're aiming to encourage investment and trade between the Virgin Islands and the U.S. mainland.
Sure. Yes, most people do think of us. We are billed as America's paradise because there's no passport needed to come to the Virgin Islands. However, we have enormous brain drain with Virgin Islanders who go up to the mainland for school and then don't have a lot of job opportunities back home, and so they remain in the Virgin Islands. Additionally, because we don't have a lot of air traffic, it's much easier to get to our neighboring island of Puerto Rico or others. It makes it more difficult for individuals to come and do business in this global world that we have. And because we're much smaller, we don't have the scale that some place like Puerto Rico has. So that's been really hard, along with exorbitant, out of control utility costs for companies to come. And so we have really been working to lower costs and to create better paying jobs and to make the community safer by providing educational opportunities as well as skill sets for Virgin Islanders that are people that are willing to come and be a part of the community in the Virgin Islands. As well as the fact that because we have the American flag, we know that our smaller Caribbean islands, nation islands, are interested in doing business with the United States. And so I really try and act as a go-between through Caribbean trade, which is something that the other Caribbean islands are really interested in, to ensure that America remains the global power in the region. There's an enormous amount of activity by mainland China, trying to use their Belt and Road Initiative in the Caribbean, which comes with it, sometimes shoddy infrastructure, as well as large interest rates on loans that they've made to do that infrastructure. And we're beginning to see the movement of Russia as well. So trying to encourage trade with American businesses in the region so that America can still be the predominant power in the Caribbean basin.
What can the United States do to make sure that we do remain the power, the global power in that region?
I've worked across the aisle with other colleagues of mine, Representative Wenstrup and others, and I want to thank him for his leadership in having like the Caribbean Trade Resolution, which reaffirms the economic partnership between the United States and the Caribbean and encourages American companies to be engaged in trade by promoting equitable economic growth and development across the region, as well as sharing the diverse stakeholders and critical trade policies and preference programs that make it easier for American businesses to be in the region. The Caribbean as a whole represents a small number of people, but they are the 6th largest trading partner with the United States because everything has to be imported. And so we're trying to encourage LNG coming from the United States, as well as so many of the other goods and services, as well as trying to encourage American companies to use the Caribbean for, some of the other garment industry and other things that they would necessarily go to the Pacific and other places to utilize.
And lastly, we're nearing the end of Black History Month. You've been speaking much about this on your X handle, on your platform there on X.
Sure.
Talk to us about some of the examples in particular that you are finding most inspirational that you'd like to share on this month.
Well, I think that what is really important is for people to be who they are, respectfully with others. And I think that the greatness of America is our diversity, is the fact that we have people who come and inject themselves and grow the American dream. And I think that innovation and that spirit of defiance, that spirit of resilience is what makes America continually the greatest country in the world. And I think that when we open ourselves to other views, I've mentioned people who really stood up for inclusion of who they were.
Delegate to the United States Virgin Islands, Representative Stacey Plaskett, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
A bomb threat at the Kennedy Center last week targets a performing arts company with the tagline, "China before communism." Now, this is a case of the Chinese Communist Party targeting an American company, and that company is Shen Yun Performing Arts, which has a mission to revive traditional Chinese culture, a culture that the CCP has spent decades trying to destroy. Now, one of those bomb threats happened at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. That was on last Thursday, just hours before their opening night performance. Around the same time, another bomb threat took place at the Miller High Life Theater in Milwaukee. Now, in both cases, no threat was found, and Shen Yun performed that night as scheduled. But there's more. On multiple occasions, Shen Yun tour buses have had their tires slashed. Now, the cuts are made in a way so that the tires don't deflate immediately, but that they're meant to explode at high speeds, which not only endanger those in the bus, but around it. Now, in November, a California man was sentenced for bribing an IRS agent to strip Shen Yun of its tax-exempt status. Now, he's also found to be acting as an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. But then there's another notable example, and that's of the Chinese embassy sending multiple letters to the government officials in the Dominican Republic not to host Shen Yun performances. That's a very common occurrence across the globe. But that didn't work in the Dominican Republic, so then the Chinese embassy chased down the Dominican president while his plane was departing, urging him to cancel the shows. The Dominican president said no, and then the Chinese officials threatened to withdraw $100 million in investments if they don't cancel the shows. The Dominican president replied, whatever, and the shows continued as scheduled. So why is the CCP targeting Shen Yun? Well, Shen Yun is seeking to revive traditional culture. China has a rich culture of 5,000 years, which is heavily influenced by Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. The Chinese Communist Party sees religion as vying for people's hearts and minds, so it seeks to destroy it. All current religions allowed in China must adopt party doctrine. Shen Yun was founded in New York in 2006 by practitioners of Falun Gong, which is a meditation discipline based on truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The CCP persecutes Falun Gong, harassing, jailing, and torturing them to force them to renounce their faith. Now, the CCP has also been harassing the performers' family members in China. One notable case was in 2010, where Chinese authorities arrested the husband of a Shen Yun Erhu player, and this is MC Li Shai Lemish, who says that this is a common occurrence for a reality of our performers. That Shen Yun performer's husband was sentenced to 18 months in a forced labor camp. Now, let's take a look at the global impact here. We're seeing bomb threats in the US, but also in Canada, Europe, as well as Taiwan, and then the majority of which are diplomatic pressure. But over here, we're seeing a lot of occurrence in New York's in the Shen Yun headquarters in New York. A lot of those bomb threats. And some of the most recent ones, back in March 27 of last year, there were a threat targeting the actresses in Shen Yun. Earlier this year in February, targeting members of U.S. Congress who support Falun Gong practitioners. And in recent months, we're seeing a new kind of threat. Now, leaked documents from the Ministry of Public Security reveal a campaign to slander Shen Yun through U.S. media. In less than a year, there have been 11 reports by the New York Times to slander Shen Yun, misrepresenting the company and omitting some key information in the reporting that cherry-pick negative accounts from a few displeased former staff and relying on inaccuracies to build a false narrative. And that comes right after the leaked documents from China to slander Shen Yun through U.S. media as well as social media came out. But here's the bigger picture. Following last week's bomb threats, MC Li Shai Lemish said that if it doesn't stop with Shen Yun, it won't stop with somebody else. What we're seeing here is the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to attack U.S. values of freedom of belief and expression, and these attacks may also be the CCP's efforts to cover up their crimes of torture and killing of Falun Gong practitioners so as not to receive international backlash. And coming up, the U.S. and Ukraine are set to sign a deal for Ukraine's rare earths minerals on Friday. But Washington and Kyiv are sharing slightly different perspectives on its status. And President Trump's addresses foreign affairs at the first cabinet meeting of his second term. We'll discuss with Mike Sarraille, founder of Talent War Group and a former Navy SEAL and Marine. That and more when we return.
This past year has been one of the hardest in MyPillow's history. It's because of you that we're making it through. My employees and I want to thank you for your continued support by extending our wholesale prices on classic MyPillows. Get standard classic MyPillows only $14.98. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.98. But it gets even better. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.98. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows $29.98 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of these wholesale prices, including my standard size MyPillow, originally $49.98, now only $14.98. Queens $18.98, Kings only $1 more. Not only that, order $75 or more, ship absolutely free. From all of us here at MyPillow, thanks America!
If you're watching this, I didn't make it. Thanks to people like you and the American Heart Association, my family never had to see this video. I was a healthy 47-year-old, no symptoms, but then my doctor discovered I had a bad heart valve that was beyond repair. The scariest day of my life was when I was sitting on a gurney as I looked and my wife was at my side and my kids had me surrounded. Deep down, you know, this could be it. This could be all there is.
Not having him around for Riley to grow up with and have that papa figure in his life, that would have been hard.
This little heart valve did something really big. It saved my life. I wouldn't be here today without it. The research for this heart valve was funded by the American Heart Association. And that's why I'm asking you to become a monthly donor for just $19 a month. When you do, you'll help fund the next medical breakthrough that could save your life or the life of someone you love. You'll also provide life-saving CPR training and help certify hospitals to give the best care to those who have had a heart attack or stroke. When you give $19 a month, we'll send you a t-shirt just like this one. From the moment you put it on, you'll help raise awareness for heart disease and stroke. Since my surgery, I had a son get married. I had a daughter graduate high school. I had another daughter give birth to a precious boy. I would have missed all that. And that's why it's personal for me.
We're very thankful for everyone who is a donor because it gives us more time.
Every 40 seconds, someone has a heart attack. The next person you help save could be someone you love or even you. Become a monthly donor today by calling or going to helpheart.org because it's personal.
Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is expected to travel to Washington on Friday to close a rare earths minerals deal. Now, but statements coming out of Washington and Kyiv make it appear that some details are still being ironed out. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the Ukraine update.
President Zelensky is going to be coming on Friday.
President Trump on Wednesday saying Washington and Kyiv are ready to sign a deal on rare earth minerals. Trump says the U.S. has so far sent much more money to Ukraine than European countries did.
We're in for probably $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. We've been able to make a deal where we're going to get our money back, and we're going to get a lot of money in the future, and I think that's appropriate.
Trump previously said the profits from Ukraine's minerals will act as compensation. The exact details of the agreement are not 100% clear yet, but Zelensky on Wednesday denied the notion that Ukraine is owing money to the U.S.
The main thing for me was that we are not in debt, and regardless of what it sounds like in the media, there is no debt of $500 billion, nor $350 billion, nor $100 billion, because it would not be fair to us.
And another issue, security guarantees. Ukraine wants the U.S. to help secure Ukraine after the fighting ends, as part of the minerals deal. Here's what Ukraine's prime minister says about the issue.
We are not considering signing any agreements without security guarantees.
But President Trump said this during his first cabinet meeting on Wednesday.
Well, I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that because it's in, we're talking about Europe as their next door neighbor.
Zelensky says the exact details and the success of the deal depend on his talks with Trump on Friday. And Russian and U.S. delegations will meet in Istanbul on Thursday.
Our high-level diplomats and experts will meet and discuss the systemic problems that have accumulated as a result of the previous administration's illegal activities to create artificial obstacles for the Russian embassy.
Moscow has had no ambassador in Washington since the previous envoy left last October. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says high-level teams will work to restore their country's diplomatic missions in Washington and Moscow. This is part of the negotiations towards ending the conflict in Ukraine. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
To discuss the latest in foreign affairs, we're happy to have on Mike Sarraille. He's the founder of Talent War Group and retired Navy SEAL officer and former Marine and Scout sniper. Mike, so great to have you on. President Trump hosted his first cabinet meeting today where he confirmed that Ukraine's President Zelensky will visit the White House on Friday to sign a rare earths minerals deal. Regarding the deal, I want to play a quick clip for you and get your response.
We'll be really partnering with Ukraine in terms of rare earth. We very much need rare earth. They have great rare earth.
Mike, what's the significance of Zelensky's visit? Why is it important to stay competitive with foreign adversaries like China in securing our mineral supply?
It's a great question. So, one, for the amount of money we've given Ukraine in the defense of their nation, to include munitions, which diminished our stockpiles, I believe we, as the American taxpayer dollars, are, I don't want to say entitled, but we have first right at any development for Ukraine. Where this is good for Ukraine is that it shows that America is committed to their redevelopment post-war. And if we have interest with mineral rights in Ukraine and Russia were to attack and violate the ceasefire or the peace agreement, then they're attacking U.S. interests. But I do think it was a great point in your previous segments that, President Trump said we should not have to sign a security agreement. That should be on NATO forces, European nations, to provide the security forces to make sure that that ceasefire or peace agreement is adhered to. And really, this is a European problem. So overall, very optimistic about the negotiations between Zelensky and President Trump coming up on Friday.
Right, I want to get into that in a second, but first I want to play a quick clip on the topic of China. Take a look.
Do you know we give billions of dollars to Afghanistan, and yet we left behind all of that equipment, which wouldn't have happened. We were getting out under me. I'm the one that got it down to 5,000 people. We were going to get out, but we were going to keep Bagram, not because of Afghanistan, but because of China, because it's exactly 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear missiles.
Mike, how consequential was, for U.S. security, was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the loss of Bagram Air Base, and are there any strategies that the U.S. could implement now on this?
So, I would not be surprised if we end up back in Afghanistan. I will say this, it was always a false notion that we were going to pull out of Afghanistan entirely. There are many generals at DOD at the time that advised Biden to keep a small force of 2,000 troops, predominantly special operations, air support, and support personnel, to maintain presence. Afghanistan had geopolitical strategic implications by nature of how close it was to China. It gave us a future staging base for potential conflicts with China. It was also a negotiation point. But to the previous segment, one thing that China did post withdrawal of the U.S. out of Afghanistan is they came in and signed an agreement with the Taliban for $540 million for rights to minerals in Afghanistan after all the blood we shed and all the money that we spent on Afghanistan. So we all know the withdrawal from Afghanistan was an abysmal failure for which accountability has never been brought to the forefront. And I believe Pete Hegseth, as Secretary of Defense, is chasing down accountability for Afghanistan, as well as the Biden administration should be held accountable as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to what the president said earlier on unequal contribution and aid to Ukraine, I want to play another clip for you.
They spent $350 billion, and Europe spent $100 billion. Now, does anybody really think that's fair? The money they spent, they get back. But the money we spent, we don't get back. I said, well, we're going to get it back.
So how important is it for Europe to take greater responsibility securing its own continent? Should the U.S. take a step back here?
This has been a problem that's been lagging for multiple administrations. NATO was flawed. Each country is supposed to give a certain percentage of their GDP, which is just grossly unproportional to what the U.S. provides. Europe at some point has to pay their fair share and do their fair share as a partner within the NATO alliance. They are banking on that they will continue to ride the coattails of the American people. You look at it from World War I to World War II, they were incapable of taking on the Germans in both those wars. It took the American might, the American power to come in. And we will always be there. But the bottom line is they have to contribute a equal or proportionate, not only financial contribution to NATO, but armament and making sure that their military is prepared for their own security in Europe. It should not be an American problem.
Now, last week, nearly 200 Venezuelan illegal immigrants were arrested in the U.S. and they were sent from Guantanamo Bay back to Venezuela. Venezuela expressed interest in accepting its own citizens. What do you make of this overall effort at the border so far, and what more would you like to see here?
So we've seen a substantial decrease in encounters at the border. Right now, it's trending in the right direction. It is problematic with the deportation of illegal immigrants. But I'll tell you what I found very interesting was Eric Prince, the former Blackwater CEO, had made a proposal about privatizing the deportation of these illegal immigrants. Trump is making strides. He heard the American people. We knew illegal immigration was a problem under the Biden administration, almost to the point of borderline criminal, how it was dealt with. So we are making advances. Right now, I've got to give a pat on the back to the Trump administration for what they're doing and the fact that we're seeing diminished encounters at the border.
Mike Sarraille, thank you very much for your insights here today.
Thank you.
A House Oversight Subcommittee scrutinizes USAID as well as the actions the Trump administration has taken on the agency. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us some highlights from Capitol Hill.
And the debate continued with DOGE and USAID on Capitol Hill, with opinions divided fiercely along party lines. Republicans largely praising the Trump administration's actions, as well as what DOGE has uncovered, with House Democrats criticizing what the Trump administration has been doing, as well as defending some of USAID's programs.
Have some of the most anti-democratic principles like censorship and the canceling of elections been funded through USAID because of opposition to the ruling regimes? Yes. Has money through USAID been funneled to terrorists? Yes.
I spoke with people in charge of warehouses in Sudan and Ethiopia, warehouses full of food, but because of DOGE, that food is trapped in the warehouse, out of reach of starving and dying moms and kids.
Ranking Member Rep. Stansberry also said that China has already moved into some areas of South Asia that have had their funding cut. One witness testified that he found U.S. tax dollars are being used to prop up, quote, radical left-wing causes, and that he found elites have been influencing U.S. leaders to push, quote, unpopular policies on the American people through the bureaucracy.
These groups, which you can see on this chart, funnel cash to DEI, transgender, and climate alarmist causes, divisive issues that the Biden administration prioritized over addressing the concrete needs of the American people.
And during her closing remarks, Chair Green summed up USAID, saying that it's basically a type of, quote, globalist propaganda used to force regime changes. She continued, saying that if it is indeed found that USAID funded terrorist organizations that resulted in the death of Americans, that criminal referrals will be made. Then Ranking Member Stansberry, during her closing remarks, urged Republicans to consider the real-world impacts of these cuts, saying that tens of thousands of people have been laid off and peoples are suffering around the world. She also called the activities of the Trump administration as, quote, illegal. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up, China's test scores are painting a false picture of their education system. We'll talk to a political economist at the American Enterprise Institute who examined the numbers when we come back.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality, a timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural, organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure, natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness. 2025, the 5th NTD International Photography Competition. Capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
there's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl,
Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. The State Department today announcing sanctions on 6 entities in China and Hong Kong that are connected to Iran's drone and missile programs. The move is part of President Trump's maximum pressure campaign on the Iranian regime to stop its weapons supply. Now, this comes just a couple days after the U.S. imposed a fresh round of sanctions on Iran's oil industry, which is their primary source of revenue. Earlier this month, the Trump administration put financial sanctions on an international network that they say ships Iranian oil directly to China. Now, the latest test scores for China indicate that their students are ahead of the other countries, but a new paper reveals that there's more to this story. To discuss the findings, NTD's Steve Lance spoke with Nicholas Eberstadt, the Henry Wendt Chair in Political Economy at the American Enterprise Institute.
Mr. Nicholas Eberstadt, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you with us. Now, China's international test scores reportedly more than 100 points higher than the corresponding averages for countries in the OECD. You've been looking into this. China known to fudge on their numbers when it comes to their GDP, according to some economists. Tell us what you found in this working paper of yours.
With 3 colleagues, Patrick Narek, Radek Sabatka, and Peter Van Ness, we took a deep dive into the information on academic achievement for the K through 12s in China. As you said, Steve, the OECD's kind of premier international standardized testing metric is called PISA, and by all indications from the test reports, China's hitting it out of the park. Their students are on average 2 years ahead of their counterparts in the OECD and the rich developed countries on the whole. They're even ahead of Singapore, which up until then was regarded as number 1. On looking at these numbers in some detail, we concluded that the China numbers did not pass the most important statistical test of all. And that statistical test is one that I call the laugh out loud test. When you remember that China is an enormous country with a huge rural hinterland, and that the students are being sampled in the only 4 of the 31 provinces, these being 4 of the most developed, of course, you've got a problem to begin with. But then as you pick at it further, the results look irreproducible. It doesn't, neither the OECD nor the Ministry of Education in China gives access so that people can try to verify or validate these. Let me give you an anecdote. This is just accidental. A friend of mine, daughter in Shanghai, who happened to be one of the students tested. What was her experience? Well, she's in what's probably the best school in high school in Shanghai, so that's cherry picking. She's in the top performing class in the best high school, so that's cherry picking. The teachers drop all instruction and just teach to this test for 6 weeks. That's more than cherry picking. And then the vice mayor of Shanghai comes in and gives them a lecture about how important it is for them to perform well for their nation, and if their parents are giving them any homework, to tell them go get lost. This is not the way kids in Massachusetts who take this test are treated. Let's put it that way.
Beyond bragging rights that China's looking for here, what are the implications? Why does it matter? And what implications does it have, not just domestically in China, but I guess you could say internationally?
Well, if these numbers were representative of China's entire student population, we'd be expecting China to take over the world economy in a generation, because these fantastic test takers would be the labor force of the future. we brought a lot of additional data to bear. It's a little bit like, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, because this is not exactly an open and transparent situation. But when we looked at some test results for rural areas, when we look at IQ tests for kids in rural areas, when we looked at the problem with the left behind children, tried to take a look at other test results, we ended up concluding that our working hypothesis is that China as a whole probably has a sort of educational quality for its kids akin to, say, Turkey. Now, Turkey is a middle high income country, which has got a perfectly creditable economy and educational system, but nobody talks about Turkey as being number one, and they probably shouldn't be talking about China as being number one in knowledge and skills for all of their kids.
Nicholas Eberstadt, American Enterprise Institute, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
California Governor Gavin Newsom tonight thanks President Trump and Environmental Protection Agency Secretary Lee Zeldin for support in fire recovery efforts in Los Angeles. The governor unveils a major economic initiative, including targeted support to speed up LA's recovery. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
California Governor Gavin Newsom sat with Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation CEO Stephen Chung at East LA College today to discuss how California can recover financially.
Newsom's initiative is to boost California's economy by supporting regional economic development from the ground up.
California is not one economy. It's the intersection of so many different economies. We're the size of 21 state populations combined, after all. So by definition, any real economic and workforce development plan had to be bottom up, not top down.
Instead of a top-down approach, the state collaborated with 13 regions to create locally driven economic plans.
We provided that $5 million grant up front. Then we did those 8 pilot programs, $39 million, because we wanted to prove to you we meant business. And we put that $39 million to work. And then you said we need more. And we provided each one of the regions an additional $14 million to take the plans to the next level.
He also said there's an additional $140 million available for ready-to-go projects. Newsom held up a book titled State Economic Blueprint as he spoke, describing his plan as a reflection of California's aspirations, concerns about displacement, and the effects of global economic shifts, including tariffs. Newsom also provided an update on Southern California's wildfire recovery efforts, announcing the official completion of Phase 1 debris removal.
Yesterday was an important milestone. Was the most comprehensive and aggressive hazardous waste debris removal that has ever been advanced by the federal government. They were able to actually achieve their goal, which was a stretch goal to begin with, of getting all the hazardous waste done within 30 days.
He noted that the wildfire recovery has moved into Phase 2 of debris removal, currently being carried out by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Newsom also mentioned additional opportunities to boost the economy, like the Olympic Games, the FIFA World Cup, and the Super Bowl, which will be coming here in 2027. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, what's in store for the Kennedy Center now that its new chairman is President Trump and several Biden-appointed board members have been fired? We'll hear from Zachary Marshall, Campus Reform's editor-in-chief, on what changes to expect. That and more when we return.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I had heard many times that heart disease is the #1 killer. It went in one ear and out the other, frankly. I never had a health issue. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. But a few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. By the time I got to the ER, the doctor decided to give me a CAT scan. He said, "I don't think you understand. You are on the verge of a heart attack." I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I received 2 stents in my arteries, stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. With you by our side, together we'll keep fighting this battle. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. Put yourself on your to-do list. It could be the most important thing you ever do. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives. Thank you.
When they learn something new and you can just see in their faces, it's such an incredible moment. It's those moments that are my favorite.
Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. Turning our attention now to public health. A school-aged child who tested positive for measles has died in West Texas. Now, this marks the first U.S. measles death in about a decade. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that his department is tracking several measles outbreaks.
We are following the measles epidemic every day. There have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. We have measles outbreaks every year.
There have been 124 confirmed measles cases so far in the Texas outbreak, which started in late January and has affected 9 counties. Authorities say that most patients are under the age of 18. Measles is a respiratory virus that can survive in the air for up to 2 hours. The CDC says that as many as 9 out of 10 people who are susceptible will get the virus if exposed. Now, most kids will recover from the measles if they get it, but infection can lead to complications like pneumonia, blindness, and even brain swelling and death. And NTD's Steve Lance spoke earlier with Zachary Marshall, Campus Reform's editor-in-chief, to discuss changes to art programming at the Kennedy Center. Let's see that now.
Dr. Zachary Marshall, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Dr. Marshall, this month the Kennedy Center Board appointed President Trump as the new chairman after he fired several Biden-appointed board members. As a professor of arts and administration and cultural policy, what do you make of this?
I think this is the most significant cultural policy change we've seen in the last 40 years. I teach this at the University of Kentucky, how government supports and funds the arts, and I can tell you that it's very important for us to be putting resources into the best art and making sure that Americans have access to it. The former Kennedy Center Board failed in that mission, so I think this is a great opportunity to get back on the path of cultural renewal and to the golden age that Trump is promising. We've had enough years of divisive politics plaguing our arts and culture.
You make a really interesting point. For those who might not know, there is a beautiful museum on the top floor of the Kennedy Center, open to the public if you're ever in the area, attending a show or not, that I highly recommend checking out to see why it was established. What was the initial intent of this cultural center, and how does it compare to the Kennedy Center you see today?
Most people don't know the legislation for the Kennedy Center was crafted in 1958 as a national performing arts center and national cultural center. That was then created into the Kennedy Center after the assassination, and they decided to make it a memorial in addition to the original intent of the building, which opened in 1971. So what we saw in the 1960s as it was being completed and being launched, we saw that the Kennedy administration and the center was prioritizing access to the arts and the best arts for all Americans, regardless of their income or their background. And that pursuit has no political affiliation. So it is in keeping with Kennedy's original mission that Trump is saying we need to have the best stars on our stage and we need to make sure we're putting the best art out there.
This is probably an area or a sector that many people didn't think was political, but here we are. So how have more traditional artists and art forms been left out of the Kennedy Center, and how does it compare when you look at these changes that you're seeing now?
Well, you can just look at the Kennedy Center Honors, which happen every December, and it honors the best artists in music, in film, in musical theater. You'll find very few conservatives among the honorees. You'll find very few conservatives or non-political artists doing solo concerts. I was at an Audra McDonald concert a few years ago at the Kennedy Center. She stopped halfway through the performance to lambast conservatives and Trump. This is a Broadway star, and the problem is that there's been too many years where Kennedy Center has endorsed initiatives and social justice programming and performances where they see criticizing the right and promoting gender ideology and promoting anti-racism theory as content neutral, which means that it's just a given. We all think this. So there's no awareness, and there hasn't been for years among the Kennedy Center leaders, that they're being extremely exclusive to people who don't think like them.
You've said in your op-ed in the Washington Times that art institutions like the Kennedy Center produce cultural value, or should, in our communities. How can we start to use art to heal some of the political divides and encourage more pride in our American identity?
This actually goes right to what my dissertation was on with art museums and using communities as a way to market and cultivate relationships through art among especially underserved communities and marginalized communities. We need to be looking at the cultural value, and this is something that's part of the cultural policy theory I teach, which is that arts institutions like the Kennedy Center create economic value for their communities through tourism, through different types of business development, but it also enriches lives. And so we need to be engaging with the communities who live around Washington, D.C. to make sure they have access to these performances, but we should not be putting a political litmus test on admission saying that you might be underserved, but if you disagree with us, you're not going to be part of the community we want.
With that said, what would you like to see moving forward, and what major programming changes do you expect to see taking place at the Kennedy Center?
What I expect to see in the next 3 years will be probably an embrace of American identity, because the Kennedy Center is our premier performing arts institution. This is what was putting on drag shows for kids. This is what was using gender affirming language, which is transgender ideology, on their campus. I think we might see a return to classics of things like Arthur Miller, maybe perhaps Stephen Sondheim. And I think we're going to also see the anniversary that we're celebrating in 2026, the 250th anniversary of our founding, be tied to the programming we're going to see in the 25 to 26 season. But President Trump is pushing arts agencies and pushing arts institutions to celebrate this upcoming anniversary. So I think we're going to see a more patriotic Kennedy Center schedule than in years past.
And just lastly and briefly, talk to us about the utilization of arts in art forms in terms of a form of soft power to project throughout the world.
Yep, so the arts are a form of soft power, which that's a term that's contrasted to hard power, which might be military power or economic power. This is a way that America is able to exert its influence throughout the world. And those of us who lived through the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and the last Trump administration saw that people around the world hated us for different things at different times, whether it was the Iraq War or the presidents we elected, but they still saw our films, they still saw our music. So soft power through the arts and culture is very important for us to maintain our position as the world's leader. And when we are able to bolster places like the Kennedy Center, which is a pinnacle of our American identity, it only increases the prestige of being an American and having American culture. And that is all part of how I think President Trump sees using the Kennedy Center to augment American identity and also our power abroad.
Dr. Zachary Marshall, really fascinating perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. From the nation's capital, I'm Jack Bradley. Have a nice evening. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.